Good morning, students. Welcome to your first science lesson. I hope you're doing well, keeping safe, and washing your hands regularly. Today, our topic is microscopic fungi. I will discuss what fungi is, where they are found, and whether they are useful to us or harmful to us. So let's begin today's lesson.
Fungi are microscopic organisms that include molds, microscopic yeast, and mushrooms. They can be found in about every environment on Earth, ranging from forests to deserts, and are present even beneath the oceans. Like plants, fungi cannot move from one place to another, but like animals, they consume other organisms and are thus called heterotrophs. Fungi are also eukaryotic, meaning that every cell of fungi includes a nucleus. A very common microscopic fungi discussed in today's lesson is yeast. Why does the name sound familiar? I will discuss later on. So yeast reproduces by a process called budding. How does this process occur? During budding, a new organism forms on the parent's body in the form of a bud or an outgrowth. After some time, the bud or the outgrowth separates from the parent's body and forms a new organism completely on its own. Here are some microscopic images of how yeast cell performs budding. Remember these images. I will discuss them later on. Fungi can be useful, and one of the most useful aspects of fungi includes baking process done by yeast. Now do you remember why the name sounded familiar? Yes, because bakers rely on fungi to make bread. This is an aerobic respiration process, and it occurs in the presence of oxygen, and at the end, carbon dioxide is released. Look at this simple reaction. Sugars present in flour are used by yeast at a certain temperature. The yeast uses all of these sugars to produce carbon dioxide. So what do you think this carbon dioxide does to the bread? Yes, it helps the dough rise. This carbon dioxide gives the dough its fluffiness. Another useful aspect of fungi includes brewing process, also performed by yeast. This is an anaerobic respiration process and is also called fermentation. Look at this simple reaction. During brewing process, glucose, which is a form of sugar, is used by yeast and is fermented or broken down to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. So what do you think this ethanol and carbon dioxide are used in? Yes, in alcohol making and in fizzy drinks. This image you see is showing brewing of yeast in a lab. So here this will convert into alcohol, and from the top CO2 will release. Fungi can also be very harmful and can cause a variety of problems. Some of these problems include skin infections like ringworm and athlete's foot. Some fungi can also be very poisonous, so not all mushrooms can be put on a pizza. Students, do you remember the earlier image I showed you of how a yeast cell performs budding? This graph explains how a yeast cell increases in number with time. Yeast cell requires glucose or sugars to perform reproduction. This glucose helps it to grow and increase in number. Look at this graph. At first, the yeast cell only begins to use the nutrients and are in less quantity. But as the nutrients are being consumed by the yeast cell, the amount of yeast cell increases. That is why the graph becomes steep. But after a while, the graph is becoming level. Why? Because a lot of the nutrients are consumed and now are limited. So the nutrients act as a limiting factor. Students, what do you think would happen if all the nutrients, all the glucose is finished in an environment? Would the yeast cell be able to grow? No. No more yeast cell will be able to grow when all the nutrients are finished. And slowly the graph will start to decline, indicating that the yeast population is decreasing with time. I will give you some time. Look at this graph in detail. Thank you, students. This was all for today. I hope you understood the lesson. If you have any questions, you can ask and I will get back